Right, so thanks again for allowing me to present this today. I was in two minds really when I was asked to do this. I'd love to help students. I particularly love to help students, particularly students that are beginning on their first presentations. And doing your presentations in an online format is really quite a bit different from doing them face-to-face. There's many things we miss doing the online presentation. So I'm going to cover some of those ideas and some of the things that you might need to think about, as well as provide some of the tips that I've learned mostly the hard way after having started online teaching in very, very short order at the beginning of this year. So if I've made a mistake, I've probably made most of them. Obviously there'll be quite a few of you here who will be presenting at the Virtual GESSS in each respective state over the next couple of weeks. And please tag things with the Virtual GESSS hashtag so that we can catch your comments and your thoughts on your experiences, not just listening today, but also when you do your presentations over the coming weeks. So this is me, as I said, as Caroline said, I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Melbourne in the School of Earth Sciences. I mainly teach structural geology and tectonics, and I also teach a little bit of our first year courses. I'll just give a little introduction as to what we're going to do today. I don't normally do outlines for scientific talks, but I think it is often a really good idea with a virtual presentation, just so that people have a clearer idea about the topics you're going to cover and the order that you're going to be doing them in. So I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about how we present online. So what the different options are about how you do this. And I'm not sure myself as to how each GESS program is going to go, whether the presentations that you'll be given will be live or pre-recorded and streamed. So there's a few options there that I'll go through. And then I will go over some of the similarities and the differences between online presenting and regular face-to-face presenting, and covering both the positives, the good differences, and also some of the negatives that we need to be aware of when preparing to present this way. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the technology options that are available to you. So this may be familiar to some of you who have already done a little bit of online presenting. And if those of you who haven't, who are just beginning to do this, then there's lots of options for you to think through there. And then I'll go through quite a few different tips for things that I think work well or things that I think don't work well to help guide your preparation. And then I'll end with talking about some different ways that you can try and make your talk a bit more engaging, because so much of what we would normally develop a rapport with our audience, we can't do that as well as we might normally do when we're presenting online. So my key messages are here, and obviously I'll come back to these at the end. And I think that's one of the things to emphasize initially is for you in preparing your presentation to really focus on your key message. So make sure you've got that articulated. Don't try, like with any presentation, face-to-face or online, don't try and tell your audience everything that you've done. Really focus on the key messages that they can take away. You'll need to be familiar with your tech choices, and that can take a little bit of time. So do that well in advance to make sure that you're going to be able to get most things right. And then have a think about how you might engage your audience in the virtual environment. But the overall message is that there are some positives to presenting online, and try and enjoy the experience, and good luck with your presentations in the coming few weeks. Okay, before I do that, I might actually share a poll here. I think I can do it, Tim, if you just bear with me. Okay, so I'm just going to launch a poll that has a few questions in it. And this is an example of one of the interactivity type tools that you can use in a Zoom platform. And there are others in different platforms as well. So what I'm asking here, first of all, is where is the audience from? It's quite wonderful in many ways that people can be listening in from so many different places. I mean, I think this year has shown us that there's really a lot of good things about virtual presentations and online meetings. The idea of talking to people from all the different states of Australia prior to this this year, as well as international, is amazing. And I'm sure you, like me, have also joined in some webinars that have been run, Geological Society of London, Geological Society of America, and so on, that you wouldn't normally be able to get to. So that's a wonderful outcome of this. So that's a nice even spread of people there. Not many people from Queensland. It's good to see some few people here from in Victoria. Most people have done that poll. There's still a couple, although maybe, I don't know whether I count in that, but I'll just give you 1 second on that one, and then we'll go to the next question. Excellent, thank you. Oh, Tim, if I do end poll, is that going to give me my next question?
Okay, should be with you in a second.
Excellent, thanks, Tim. So my second question is, it'd be really great for me to know how many of you are students and whether or not you'll be presenting at a virtual guest coming up, or whether or not you might be presenting at another virtual meeting soon. Or indeed, if you're a regular GSA member or professional, how many of you are in the audience? So this can be a really good way, if you're doing a presentation live, of getting some connection with your audience to know who's there and what their sort of goals are in terms of following what you're saying. It's great to see so many people are members of GSA, and you can select more than one option on this poll as well. And certainly the online events that I've been part of as an audience member, having the polls in is a really good way of keeping people involved. So quite a few of you presenting at the virtual guests, which is fantastic, and also other upcoming virtual meetings. Thanks for that, Tim. We might just go to the next one. That's all right, please. There won't be too many people voting for this one, but if you are presenting at the virtual guest, will this be your first online presentation? And it's not for anyone. Wow, that's fantastic. That's really good. Everyone's done this before. That's really great, because doing this for the first time at an event where there will be lots of attendees is really, can be quite an intimidating process. Oh, someone will be presenting for the first time this way. And I can't begin to explain how intimidated I was at the beginning of my online teaching this year, with zero knowledge of how any of these things worked and zero experience. So that was really, really tough. But great to see a few people have already been through this. Thanks for that, Tim. If we can just go to the next one.
Okay, let's just switch that now.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to get an idea here was from the students as to whether this would be the first time you've presented at any meeting. And obviously, given the previous answers, I know what this poll is going to say, but I do give a special shout out of sympathy to people that will be presenting for the first time ever their research work in this way, because it's in some ways you don't sort of know any different really, but in another way it's a very intimidating way to begin. And I would encourage if those of you who are in that position to really reach out to friends and colleagues and mentors who might be able to give you some advice and review your presentation, because presenting full stop is challenging when you first get started, and let alone presenting in this way. So special thoughts to those people. Excellent, thank you for that, Tim. I'm glad that worked well in the end. I'll just take that off there. Okay. All right, I'll return to my presentation now. It's great to know that information. Thank you. So there's a number of different ways that you might be doing your online presentation. So you could be doing it live in an online platform, just like I'm doing now. So this might be Zoom, like we're using. This might be WebEx. This might be Skype or Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting. There's any number of these different options that you might be using. And again, as I say, I'm not sure what each of the virtual guests are doing. You also might be doing this another way, in which you might be pre-recording your presentation and then it's uploaded to a video sharing site, and then people watch it asynchronously in their own time. And certainly from what Caroline said earlier, that's the way the AESC will be working in Hobart. So there's some similarities between the two different approaches, and there's also some differences too, and I'll try and talk to both of those as we go through. Another option is actually the option that I used with my teaching this year, and that's a pre-recorded presentation that then is broadcast during a live event. And so there's a recording there for people to access in their own time, but there's also the opportunity for people to listen in as I broadcast it in a live session. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, and that might be used in certain meetings down the track. You might come across that. So I think personally, I think that worked quite well. Okay, so some of the differences with an online presentation. There are some really good things about it. If you're doing a pre-recorded presentation, like for AESC, one of the benefits is that you can have several attempts to get it right. And I certainly wouldn't advocate you spending, days editing and re-recording and so on your work, but it does give you opportunity to be able to do it more than once. Whereas in a face-to-face meeting, you obviously get your one chance on the podium and that's it. So this is a good positive. And it also means that you have fewer or no nerves when you come to the presentation day, because you know that your presentation is already recorded and available for people. It also means you can get the timing right, which those of us who've been to many meetings before would have many memories of people really rushing through the last 5 or 10 slides, because you do lose track of time when you start to talk, and I'll probably do that today too. So if you're pre-recording, you can make sure that you have your talk done in the time allowed for it. It also allows you to focus a little bit more on the engagement with people, and particularly if there's things happening in the chat. If you're in a live session, you can engage with that more than you would if you were in person. And some of the things that I think are really the best advantages of online presenting is that you have an ongoing record of your presentation. If you were giving a face-to-face talk, you give it, and unless someone's there recording it for you, which is not normal, you can't watch it back again. So by pre-recording or having your live presentation recorded for you, you can look over it again, you can share it with people that weren't able to attend on the day, in order to either advertise yourself or to seek collaborations and feedback from different people around the world. So you have a permanent record of it. And it's also good for you to get into practice of looking at yourself talking and thinking about what you can do to improve. So having that record, I think, is a really good benefit of doing a recorded presentation. But there's also some less good things about it, particularly when you get started. So it's all quite new, even those of you who may have done some presentations before. It's still relatively new to everyone, really. People have only been doing this this year. So it's all new and a bit intimidating, and it can be quite hard to know where to start. And this is really when I would encourage you to reach out to your mentors and friends and colleagues for tips and advice that's relevant to you. So don't be like this poor little person here in panic mode. That was me at the beginning of this year. Definitely reach out to people and ask for advice. Lots of people now have gone through this, so people are more than willing to share their experiences and advice. One of the other less good things is technology has known to go wrong, and I will talk more about that later. Whereas a face-to-face talk, about the only thing that can go wrong will be the microphone or the slides not advancing or so on. So there's a lot more options for things to go pear-shaped when you're using technology online. The nervousness before a live presentation, like the one I'm doing today, could be worse when you're online than when you're isolated. So if you are doing a live presentation, I'd bear that in mind. Normally, if you were face-to-face, you would bump into somebody at the coffee stand before you gave your talk, or you would see people on the way to your talk that you knew. And just that incidental conversations would help diffuse your nervousness. And you don't have that when you're just sitting in your own office or your own home. And so that you can allow yourself to really get quite nervous in the live presentation. So bear that in mind as well. And that brings me to a really important point, is that there is no audience in the traditional sense of the word. And when you're speaking, you miss many of the non-verbal cues that a live audience would provide for you. Those wonderful people that nod their heads when people say things in talks, particularly student talks, is so encouraging to know that you are making your points clearly and people are understanding what you're saying. Those of us who have done quite a lot of face-to-face talks will absolutely, I'm sure, agree that those looks you get from the audience can be really, really helpful in encouraging you in your talk. So as I say at the bottom there, as much as a real life audience could make you nervous, the audience is often what helps you engage with your own work and really elevate the talk to become really interesting and engaging. And so when you're missing that, that can be quite a challenge. So this is our normal lecture theatre at the University of Melbourne, where I would normally have been teaching, the Fritz Lerver, and you're talking to no one. And I have to say that if you're pre-recording your talk by using one of the different bits of software I'll talk about in a moment, you're sitting at home, you're just talking to your computer. The absence of an audience is really quite bizarre. So again, if you haven't had much experience with online presenting, be prepared for facing up to that weirdness. I certainly still find it quite bizarre to sit at my desk here and talk to the screen, but it does get easier with practice. I read somewhere that people make up their own audiences. So if you've got friends with soft toys or so on, you can line them up like I've got lined up here. My daughter actually did this for me to do a DIY audience. But some of my colleagues did actually do this earlier in the year because they found it really so strange to talk to an empty room. I'm not sure if that will help you. These little friends didn't actually help me, but I didn't tell my daughter that she was trying to be helpful. Similarly, when you're presenting live, like I'm doing now, I can only see a couple of people's names on the side of the Zoom screen. So you'll need to be prepared for looking at a series of blank squares. You're not sure if people are listening to you or if they're doing something else, but they're out there somewhere. So that can be quite strange to get your head around as well. And as I say at the bottom, in a live presentation, we have the same problem here, particularly if you share your screen in presenter view. And if you do that, then you can't see anybody in your Zoom window. So there's a solution to that, which I'll go over it towards the end of the talk. But the absence of an audience is really quite something to get used to. And I never realised when we record our lectures here at Melbourne, the easiest way to do it is by not having our faces shown in there, but the number of things that I would normally do like this in anticline or whatever, you can't do if you're not also recording your face, which our system doesn't easily allow. So bear that in mind as well. Gestures and so on don't really work the same. Okay, so now how are we going to do this? And there's many different options for software that you can use to record or screencast your presentation. So obviously we're using Zoom today, and even though we might be familiar with Zoom as a meeting tool like we're using, it's also a really good one to just for you to be able to personally record your presentation as well. There's lots of others. Echo 360 is the one we use here at Melbourne for the standard lecture capture. Camtasia is one I use quite a lot. And I have not personally used PowerPoint to record my presentations, but colleagues have done that. So it depends on what you have available to you. If you're at an institution, you might have some more options than if you're a private person, but lots of different options there, and it can take a little bit of time to get used to the option that you choose. Having said that, there's so much help available by just on Google. So there's been an explosion, obviously, of people presenting this way. So there's an explosion of help out there. So you can solve pretty much any problem or anything you want to do by looking online. But I can recommend Camtasia and Zoom as being quite good. Okay. Sorry, I'll just see what yeah, that's also, Greg has made a good point about using the digital hands up on Zoom to be able to indicate your connection with some concepts. So that's really good. That does work well. So some of my tips. Practice, particularly if you're doing it for the first time. Make sure that you are clear on both your message. So this is the message you want to communicate as well as the way you want to communicate it. So normally with a face-to-face presentation, you would just make sure that you knew what you were saying and you had a clear story that you wanted to tell. Now you have to do that, but you also have to manage the different technology or mode that you're working with. And this can be different. There's a lot of differences between different software and different platforms, that if you're using one that you're not that familiar with, there will be a few things that you will need to learn in order to be able to use that proficiently. So do this well ahead of time if you can, because you can be caught out there with some tricks in different software packages. Consider your voice projection. So normally when we're speaking face-to-face in a lecture theatre, you're standing up, you're at the front, and you have a wonderful open space to project your voice in and to allow you to vary your tone, to vary your pace, and so on much more easily. I'm sitting down at the moment because that's the way my work desk is set up here. But I would recommend that if you can record or present standing up, you can get much better voice projection on your recording or your live presentation that way. But do a few test recordings, some practice runs, and listen to yourself and see if you're projecting your voice in a really effective way in different scenarios, sitting or standing. That was something that I didn't really think about when I first started, but then when you sit and listen to your own presentation back on the recording, you get to realise how you are sounding to your audience. Your pointer or your cursor is an important thing to consider as well. So in the face-to-face world, we would be using a laser pointer, or if you're old school like me, a little wooden stick. But in the online environment, you have your simple cursor to use here. And I've actually kept mine small today, which I wouldn't normally do. Normally I would go into the system preferences on my Mac and I would make my cursor much larger so that you can see it more easily. Frankly, I forgot this morning. I meant to, but that's what I didn't do. So there's ways in which you can scale up your cursor. So that can be quite helpful. Some different recording software has different ways of handling this as well. So this little screen grab at the bottom is something that Camtasia gives you options to do inside their screencasting mode. So wherever you put the mouse, it highlights with a yellow circle. So that is quite good, particularly if you're showing quite complicated figures and diagrams and graphs and so on, to highlight what you're looking at to make it much easier for your audience to follow what you're doing. There's also a little software app called Mouse Posse, I presume you say it, that does a very similar thing to this, and it actually dims the screen to highlight the thing that you're pointing at. So that can be quite useful as well. Only works with certain hardware, software configurations. A microphone. The inbuilt microphone in your computer is probably not going to be good enough for a presentation that's broadcast in this way. You don't need to get fancy with a standalone microphone, although if you're doing a lot, you might choose to do that. I just use the microphone on my headset, and that seems to work fine. I did some test recordings when I started the online teaching using a separate microphone I have as well as the inbuilt microphone as well as this, and I found this to be really quite fine. But do try and use a microphone if you can. Also need to check your lighting. So you need to choose where you sit. This is only if you're recording yourself in your webcam or you're speaking live like I am at the moment. Make sure you're not in the corner of a dark room or sitting in front of a bright window or anything like that that's going to make you hard to see. Certainly your audience, even if you are sharing your webcam like I am, your audience can choose not to look at that. They can minimize you and just look at the slides you're sharing, no question. But if people are looking at you, they want to be able to see you. This one here, I definitely learnt the hard way. Use the most reliable internet connection you have, especially when you're doing things live. I was using the Wi-Fi initially when I started teaching, and I had so many difficulties with dropping out of the internet and so on. So I've gone back to a hard cable connecting me directly to the modem in our house. So particularly for live things, obviously, or something that you're recording to the cloud, check to make sure that your internet connection is as good as it can be. Always try and remember to turn off notifications. Guaranteed, when I started online teaching, I would forget to turn off my email, and no matter what time of the day I was recording the lecture, and it was usually really quite early in the morning, someone would email me and I'd have the annoying set off in the recording. So make sure you turn that off before you record as well. And ensure you keep to time as best as possible. And I said before, this was one of the good advantages of pre-recording, is that you can get this right. In some recording software, it's quite easy to follow how you're tracking with time, but others, particularly if you're using a full screen, it can be harder. So I put my phone right next to my computer when I'm doing a time talk to keep me on track. You don't have a chair there who's giving you the bell like normal as to whether you're close to ending time. And if your timer goes up to this, then I think you should probably start talking. I left it, stopped talking. I left it going by mistake and went for 17.5 hours. So that's definitely the time to stop. Okay, some other tips. If you're speaking live or recording yourself on your webcam, try and look at the camera. It is hard to do, especially when you can also see yourself, you can see some members of the audience, and obviously you also want to look at your slides to make sure you're pointing out the right things. This is so much like the positive effect of making eye contact with the audience when you're in a face-to-face presentation, but it is so much harder when you can't physically see those people. So there's any number of sort of hacks that are out there about this. I like this cute little soft toy that someone's put behind their webcam screen. These are a couple that I've made up. My little friend here, I don't actually have him connected today, but the idea that looking at some eyes or something that looks like a face can really help you focus in on the webcam where your face is being recorded rather than looking elsewhere on the screen. Pegs are another idea that lots of people put forward, and one of my daughters made this little Lego creation, which I thought was ideal for sticking up behind the laptop screen to focus me on the camera as well. So lots of ideas there as to how to try and do that. And I'm sure nobody expects you to talk into the camera all the time like a newsreader or a professional, but do try and do it when you're able to. Virtual backgrounds can be problematic. You can disappear mid-presentation, or parts of you can disappear mid-presentation, which is probably not what you want. But if you do need to use one, and many of us do, if we have a lot of, we're all working from home, so we're not in nice, tidy, clean places, especially not me. But do test it thoroughly if you're going to use a virtual background. Otherwise, just try as best you can to avoid too much distraction in the background. I like to use maps. This was a fun thing I did with my students at the beginning of the year. I put up a different geological map or a topographic map, whatever I had behind me. I eventually ran out because I wasn't expecting to be away from my office for so long. So today's map is a geological map of Melbourne. Another tip is to make a time and book yourself in to record your presentation, if you're pre-recording, that is. It can be really, really easy to procrastinate on that and put it off because it's an intimidating task. You think, oh, I'll do that tomorrow, or I'll do that tomorrow. So book yourself in for a practice session and for your actual recording session. If you are pre-recording, try as best you can to be in a quiet environment with minimum of background noise if you're pre-recording. If you're presenting live, don't worry so much about that. People will interrupt you. There will be noises. There will be diggers and chainsaws next door, and Zoom bombers like my characters here who keep popping up in my recordings. So do your best for sure, but don't worry too much if those distractions or interruptions happen. We're all no doubt familiar with these 3 examples I showed here at the bottom of famous Zoom fails, as they're called. The fellow years before Zoom with his little kids coming in on his BBC interview, this fellow in the UK with his cat wandering in front of his camera, and this woman who allegedly turned herself into a potato in a Teams event. So lots of funny things happen, but people will be understanding in large part when this stuff happens. Okay, another good tip, which took me a while to work out, is that you can, if you're using Zoom, that is, you can share just a portion of your screen. So it means that you don't have to go into presenter mode, because when you go into presenter mode, that's all you can see. So you can't see any of the audience, you can't see the chat window, and you can't see your next slide coming up either. Whereas if you choose to share a portion of your screen, then you can still see your upcoming slides, you can still see people in the meeting, and you can still see the chat window. So this is a bit of a revelation when I realized that you could do this. So those of you in Zoom, just look for the advanced tab when you go to screen share. And then this is what it looks like. So it's only sharing what's shown in the green box here, and you can obviously change that depending on what you're doing. It allows you to a little bit more control over what you're seeing. You could also try the slides as background option in Zoom. So this is only beta in Zoom. I did try it yesterday when I was preparing this. If it works well, you appear nicely at the bottom on all of your slides rather than being in a separate Zoom window. But as you can see here, it doesn't work for me. So I haven't used it, but you might want to have a play around with that if you can. It is a nice look, a sort of very professional look if it works well. Another advantage of online presentation is accessibility. So if you're pre-recording a video, you can try and add captions to it so that people with hearing concerns are more able to follow your presentation. There is live captioning options in Zoom. I haven't turned that on today. I haven't really experimented with that as much as I would like to. But certainly in a program like Camtasia, you can add in the captions manually, which is quite easy, but could be quite long if you're giving a presentation like this one I'm giving today. But for a 10-15 minute talk, that's probably reasonable to be able to do that manually. This program has been highly recommended to me as quite good at the auto captioning. However, any auto captioning, you really do have to check well, because a lot of the geological words don't translate well to captions. So you might get some amusing or at worst possibly offensive captions being added to your presentation, depending on how many technical words that you're using. This example here from Twitter, this woman is using the background slides option I showed before to much better effect than I did, so it looks quite professional, and she has used this video program to add her automatic captions on here. Really good for pre-record and really boosts accessibility in what would otherwise be quite difficult in a live face-to-face meeting. There's also a number of online tools where you can check the colour accessibility of your slides as well for people with vision issues too. So there's lots happening in that space. Okay, so that's some of the technical details. So I'd just like to end with a few comments on how to make the presentation engaging. This is obviously really important when we present face-to-face as well, but it's a little bit easier there when you're physically there. You can see people and make eye contact and wander around and so on. So some of the techniques that you'll have to use online are going to be slightly different. So try and vary your pace and tone, and focusing on the voice projection that I mentioned before. Show your face by webcam if you're comfortable doing so. And this may not be, you may not be comfortable doing it, and that's totally fine. If you are comfortable, it's probably worth doing it. I might just see if I can make this work, if I'm all right for time. Carolyn, it's probably only about 5 minutes. Is it all right to go?
Yep, we're at 16 past now, so 14 minutes.
Okay, great. I'll just open this and hopefully this will work. So this was a presentation that I watched. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay, I know what I have to do. This is a talk that I listened to last week at the ACSME Teaching and Learning Conference. And this fellow, I mean, he's very experienced at making videos and online presentations and so on, but he didn't show his face here. It wasn't the sort of talk that we're doing, but it was still extremely engaging because of the techniques that he used.
Before the semester starts, for those of us who are still writing exams or using exams in our assessment, and why this is such an important paradigm shift for tackling some of the issues we've been facing, particularly in the face of a global pandemic, around academic integrity. Now, I know some of you might just be plain frustrated by the mere suggestion and that this is obvious, and some of you might be shocked that this is not what everybody does. Well, I can assure you it's not what everybody does. So just hear me out and I'll tell you why I think this is an important paradigm shift. So it's a bit past the middle of the semester and you get an email from your colleague saying that they need your exam questions by the end of the week because they have to compile the exam paper and send it off to the exams department. Well, you tell yourself every year that you wouldn't get yourself into this position and that you'd be more organised, but you're an academic and you're busy. Oh, and by the way, says your colleague, because we're in, the middle of a global pandemic, it's not actually going to be a paper-based exam this year. It's going to be a take-home exam. And because students will be at home and they can Google things or text their friends and collaborate on the exam, could you just make sure your questions are a bit different this year and not simply something that you could Google? Oh.
Okay, so I just showed a section of that because Chris didn't show himself on that talk, on that presentation at all, but that very casual tone that he was giving out then, and that amazing chalkboard thing. And there's various different chalkboard apps that will do things like that for you reasonably easily. So doing something different is a really good way to make your presentation a little bit more engaging and a little bit more memorable. But you can combine things and mix it up. So if you've got videos, you can put them in either as links or as edited into your talk. You can make use of some of the interactivity tools that we used at the beginning, so polling in Zoom, but obviously that would depend on what you're able to do in the time that you've got. But just try and mix it up and make things a little bit different if you can. That chalkboard app that Chris used is called Doodly. I haven't played with it, but he said it's really quite good for, and he didn't do the whole talk like that. He had some interleaved, I should say, videos of himself in the lab doing various things. So the idea, the fact of him mixing up what he was showing really helped, I think, in making that engaging. Another really engaging presentation I listened to recently, again, it was on teaching and learning, so there wasn't so much data as just words. And the people were from University of Tasmania, and every slide had a different background of a gorgeous picture of Tasmania, which of course is gorgeous anyway, so it wasn't hard to do that, but they had so many beautiful pictures. And again, it made the talk really engaging because there was something else about it that people were focusing on, which helped them be able to pay attention. You can also add something fun or something a little bit different, and I wouldn't be doing this for your whole talk perhaps, but have a bit of think, see what you can do, think creatively about what you're trying to present, add something in that could be a little bit fun, just to set you apart from all the other talks. Having been to quite a few online events and you listen to talk after talk after talk, it's really the ones that do have something slightly different that stick in your mind. So this woman is from the UK, Stacey Phillips. She's quite amazing. She does her SciComm work. She's a geologist with little Lego stop motion films, and they're fantastic. I'm not saying people need to spend the time doing that, but that kind of thing, just some fun stuff to add in. You could even just do something simple like a talk progress indicator. So you could have this little person step across the bottom of the screen as your talk progresses, so people know they're getting towards the end. So just things like that, just have a think about creatively. Okay, so they're my tips really. One of my key messages is that something may go wrong, particularly with live presentations. So me setting off the polls didn't work so well today, and Tim saved me there, but there's any number of things that can and do go wrong. And I guess I'm saying this just so that you've got this in your mind. You're not surprised or shocked or stressed out when these things happen, because they're almost guaranteed they will. I found this message I sent to one of my friends the first day of home learning about the absolute disaster it was, and how upsetting it was for me, because I wasn't very experienced, and I wasn't prepared for so many things to go wrong. This image here on the right hand side was what my computer did about 90 seconds before the start of I think it was my online prac exam. My computer just decided it didn't want to go. We worked it out in the end, but any number of these things may happen. Just be prepared as much as you can by practicing as much as you can, going over your tech and familiarising yourself with the different options and the different things that may work. But even though you should remember that things can and do go wrong, remember that people are really very understanding. And I think the barriers and the sort of walls that we used to put up for face-to-face presentations are gone now, and everyone's understanding and everyone's sort of on the same page with this. Everyone's been through the experience, or most people have, and they're very, very understanding. So don't even think about getting stressed if something like this happens. Just stay calm, and the people helping you out in your presentation in terms of the hosts will no doubt step in and help you where they can. Okay, so that's all I've got to say. I'm very happy to have any discussion or ask any questions. Those of you presenting at a virtual GESS coming up, good luck. I'm sure you'll be absolutely amazing, and I look forward to listening in to the talks where I can. Thanks, everyone.